As an academic in the third world, I feel what obstructs our learning is lack of critical engagement. Therefore, in this short talk, I'd like to navigate the intricate landscape of education, urging a departure from rote learning and these stagnant, stale pedagogical devices and practices towards an ethos of inquiry and critical thinking. So I call this towards critical enlightenment. A saying ascribed to Helvetius, as quoted by Bertrand Russell, goes, "Men are born ignorant, not stupid. They are made stupid by education." So the task before us is clear. We do not want to churn out nonsense, even if it is to borrow again from Russell, intellectual rubbish. The question is how? The response is simple, by asking questions. To begin with, what is a question? Of course, we know it is the 5 W's, what, why, when, where, who, and how, but what does it do? It determines what we call the universe of discourse, or the content, or what we talk about. So if I ask you what time is it, and you tell me that the sun is shining today, even this may be a fact and it may be true, but it is outside the parameter of the question asked. Most of our stupidity comes from these kind of responses. And most of the examination papers that we see are more of the same. I'm reminded of a story, and this is a true story, how a student learned an essay on a cricket match for the matriculation examination. But in the exam, the student had to write on my airplane journey. So he was smart enough to start the memorized essay from, I looked out of the window of my aircraft, and what did I see? A cricket match. And of course, the rest came easy. But is this the kind of creativity that we foster? This is not specific to Pakistani learning, but is common among Muslims as well, who have become, as I once called in a conference paper, victims of mnemonic success. We as memorizers of the Holy Quran tend to rote learn even what is not sacred, forgetting that the digital age offers us information with just click of a finger. So encyclopedic knowledge therefore is available and does not need to be memorized. Unfortunately, we won the race in Memory Olympics and did not move on. But what does a question look like if it is to determine the universe of discourse? It should not be too wide, nor too narrow, otherwise it becomes an empty question or no question at all. As in, have you stopped beating your wife? So whether one says yes or no, it is like in a throw of dice. One says heads, you win, tails, I lose. This is a pseudo question, or no question at all, for a genuine question necessarily abates ignorance. This question had disguised conclusions. And the purpose of education is not to inquire to a preconceived conclusion, for that would not be a method of reasoning, but of rationalization. The purpose here is to vindicate or justify, and not to validate or seek a disinterested path to truth. Knowledge is to lead us wherever it takes, and not lead us to justify what we accept on other grounds, that is, beliefs or superstitions. If it is so important, why is questioning discouraged? Because it seems like a subversive activity. It shakes the status quo. And in an authoritarian culture like ours, it is a sign of disrespect. In the domain of philosophy also, we see Socrates having to drink hemlock because people in control were threatened. Remember that power is a heady feeling. According to a fable, when Aurangzeb imprisoned Shah Jahan, his father, he asked him if there was one wish that he could be granted. And Shah Jahan said, "Send me some students to teach." At which Aurangzeb's retort was, "Obviously, traces of grandeur still persist." Here I'd also like to share a personal anecdote. We're all mostly teachers here at FC College, and we should be aware of what we do unwittingly. I played spelling games with my daughter, and she had more than the class level of spellings. One day the teacher wrote an incorrect spelling, and when my daughter ventured to correct the teacher, her sharp reprimand was, "Are you the teacher or am I?" As teachers, we are not infallible. Neither do we know everything. And it is okay to accept our ignorance, for knowledge begins in humility. For there is no stupid question. Similarly, there is no one right answer. One of Plato's most famous dialogues beautifully captures this method of inquiry that propels us towards enlightenment or the ongoing never-ending search for knowledge and truth. And I'd like to quote this. "And surely it is the most blameworthy ignorance to believe that one knows what one does not know. It is perhaps on this point and in this respect, gentlemen, that I differ from the majority of men. And if I were to claim that I'm wiser than anyone else, it would be in this, that I have no adequate knowledge of things in the underworld, so I do not think I have." End of quote. Plato gave us this dialogical method. The prime characteristic of a dialogue is to be able to see the opposite point of view, the opposing point of view. For every thesis, there is an antithesis, like Hegel said, leading to a synthesis, which becomes a thesis to another antithesis, culminating in a continuing dialect. This is modeling a critical theory of knowledge on our road to enlightenment, for it incorporates a skeptical dissent. It is not just problem solving, but problem posing as well. It cannot therefore be a monologue, but a discussion between many, if not a dialogue or a two-way transaction. Remember that Socrates was a midwife of ideas, so he was just a facilitator, not an instructor. Also, if the teacher occupies center stage, they snatch the joy of learning from the students, the ability to think and to rethink. This transformating pedagogy is the necessary ingredient leading to enlightenment. This, however, cannot be subsumed under the term gnosis or light, which is a Neoplatonic notion influenced by Zoroastrianism. For gnosis borrows from mystical spirituality rather than knowledge. Today, knowledge seems to be empirical and scientific, and the STEM subjects are encouraged, that is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. However, I do not want to confine myself to this, for that would only be the knowledge of the concrete. And if one does subscribe to that, that would not be science, but scientism. So, to what may be considered a critical illumination is when we are able to make connections. I use the term rationalization. A concept that needs to be stressed from the same family is confirmation bias. That is to rummage for research items that confirm our bias rather than tahqiq or research or a dispassionate search without implicit assumptions. I would like to quote from Kashful Mahjoob the first Persian treatise on Sufism written by Ali Hajweri or Data Sahib, the patron saint of Lahore. In this chapter on Sufism, he was able to collect interviews from a great many scholars of Sufism which he recorded. But he also put down narrators for critics of Sufism, and their negative thoughts were given as much importance as the positive ones. Unfortunately, in our research, we only look for confirming instances, and this closes the mind for speculation or critique. That is not the route to enlightenment. Knowledge is thus not akin to proselytizing, preaching, or indoctrination. It has to be non-purposive for it not to be miseducative. The teacher's task is not to persuade, but let the students find eureka moments, and this is a quote from Archimedes, which lead to meaningful understanding. And as Plutarch said, the correct analogy for the mind is not a vessel that needs filling, but wood that needs exciting and igniting, no more. And then it motivates towards originality and instills the desire for truth. I have some other references, but I'm going to skip those. In the VUCA environment, and this is an acronym that was coined by the US military after the Cold War, that is the environment of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. We need to inculcate a more than average thoughtfulness by active learning, which is an in-depth, reflexive dialogue that provides opportunities for students to think and reflect on what they're learning, how they're learning, and the significance of what they're learning. The need to enlightenment, therefore, begins by getting rid of inert ideas. And this is a quote from Whitehead, that is to say, ideas that are merely received into the mind without being utilized or tested or thrown into fresh combinations. This leads us to uncertainty and anxiety. But if it all is flux, and also if you can't step into the same river twice, as Heraclitus said, how can fossilized, stagnant ideas be the end-all and be-all of all our academic endeavors? All we have to do is to challenge, to unlearn, learn, and relearn, to move away from the drill to the thrill of learning. Thank you.